The discovery. Dr. Nima Khalid brushed dust from what appeared to be a metallic panel, her fingers trembling not from the bitter cold of Thesha 9, but from excitement. The archaeologist's breath formed small clouds in the frigid air as she worked, ignoring the discomfort of kneeling for hours in the excavation pit. Tariq, bring the scanner over here, she called to her assistant. I think we've found something significant. Tariq Omandi, a lanky Turellian with skin that shifted colors with his mood, currently a curious orange, hurried over, his six-fingered hands carefully balancing the delicate equipment. Is it what we've been looking for? He asked, his voice hushed with anticipation. I believe so, Nima replied, accepting the scanner. The composition matches the anomalous readings that brought us here. Definitely not natural to this planet. Around them, the barren landscape of Thesha 9 stretched in all directions, a world that had never supported complex life of its own. Yet here, buried beneath meters of ice and rock, lay evidence of visitors from long ago. The excavation site buzzed with activity as a dozen researchers from various species worked under artificial lights that pushed back against the planet's perpetual twilight. Director Vask Dorn, an imposing Centauran with metallic skin that captured and reflected the harsh work lights, approached with measured steps. His species was renowned for their analytical minds and stoic demeanor. Dr. Khalid, your preliminary report suggested a 73% probability of progenitor artifacts. Has that assessment changed? His voice was like polished stone, smooth, heavy, precise. Nima didn't look up as she ran the scanner over the panel. It's not progenitor technology, Director. The material composition is inconsistent with anything in our database. She paused, steeling herself before continuing. The molecular structure suggests human origin. Vask's body stiffened almost imperceptibly. That is a significant claim, Doctor. One that requires substantial evidence. See for yourself, Nima said, handing him the scanner. And there's more. These markings, they appear to be human script. The panel she had uncovered bore inscriptions in a language that hadn't been seen in 8,000 years. Every schoolchild in the Galactic Coalition learned that humans had been a promising but ultimately self-destructive species, achieving limited space travel before annihilating themselves in what historical texts called the Terminal War. The ruins of their civilization served as cautionary tales across 1,000 worlds. This contradicts the established timeline, Vask said after studying the readings. Human civilization never achieved this level of material science according to archaeological consensus. Maybe the consensus is wrong, Nima replied. The words hung in the air between them, dangerous in their implication. Questioning the historical record regarding humanity was not merely academic heresy, it was politically sensitive. The Coalition's founding principle was to avoid humanity's fate through cooperation and careful technological advancement. We should notify the Historical Truth Commission before proceeding further, Vask said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Nima glanced around at her team, scientists from 12 different species, all watching with barely contained curiosity. 8 years of searching, following faint traces and disputed accounts, had led them to this moment. With respect, Director, Coalition Protocol grants expedition leaders 48 hours to verify discoveries before mandatory reporting. She met his metallic gaze. I intend to use that time. Before Vask could respond, a tremor ran through the ground beneath them. Subtle at first, then growing in intensity. Seismic activity, asked Tariq, his skin shifting to a worried purple. No, Nima said, watching as the panel she'd uncovered began to glow with a soft blue light that spread outward, illuminating previously invisible lines across the excavation area. It's activating. Everyone back. Vask commanded, pulling Nima away from the panel as the ground split open. The team retreated to safety as a massive structure began to rise from beneath the surface, ice and rock cascading from its sides. Within minutes, a towering obelisk stood before them, at least 30 meters tall, its surface covered in the same strange alloy and inscriptions. Impossible, Tariq whispered. Our ground-penetrating radar showed nothing of this size. Because it wasn't there before, Nima realized. It assembled itself just now. Self-constructing architecture on this scale. She turned to Vask, whose metallic features were unreadable. This technology is far beyond what the historical record claims humans possessed. The obelisk's surface wasn't merely covered in writing, it displayed a three-dimensional star map that slowly rotated, highlighting specific systems with pulsing green markers. Those are coalition worlds, Vask observed, his professional detachment finally cracking. All of them. Not just any worlds, Nima said, studying the map. These are the founding worlds of the coalition, the first 12 systems to form the alliance after humanity's supposed extinction. Tariq approached cautiously. Dr. Khalid, look at these symbols, they appear to be time signatures. Nima examined where he pointed. These dates, they're future timestamps from the perspective of when humans allegedly disappeared. But they perfectly match when each of these worlds joined the coalition. They knew, Vask said quietly. They predicted the formation of our civilization. Or they planned it, Nima suggested. The implications were staggering. For millennia, the coalition had built its understanding of the universe on the premise that humanity had been a failed experiment in evolution, intelligent but ultimately self-destructive. Countless philosophies, political systems, and even religions had incorporated this belief. If humans hadn't destroyed themselves but had instead achieved technological superiority and departed for unknown reasons, possibly even guiding the development of later civilizations, everything would need to be reconsidered. We need to report this immediately, Vask said, already reaching for his communication device. Will they believe us? Nima asked. Or will they order this site destroyed to preserve the established narrative? Vask paused, his finger hovering over the device. It was a legitimate concern. The Historical Truth Commission had rejected similar discoveries in the past, dismissing them as misinterpretations or hoaxes. Some researchers who had persisted in challenging the official history had found themselves discredited, their careers destroyed. We need more evidence, he decided. Document everything. We'll establish an irrefutable case before going public. As the team worked to record their discovery, none of them noticed the small probe that detached from the obelisk's apex and shot silently into space, transmitting data to destinations unknown. High Counselor Javed Rashid paced the length of his office in the coalition's central tower, datapad clutched in his hand so tightly his knuckles had whitened. The other 6 members of the Security Council watched in silence, their diverse physiologies all displaying signs of tension. This is the third such activation this cycle, he finally said, his voice controlled despite his agitation. First the installation on Proxima Centauri 4, then the orbital platform around Altair, and now this. How many more human artifacts will wake before we acknowledge what's happening? We don't know that there's a threat, countered Counselor Lithera, her translucent tentacles waving in a gesture of caution. These installations appear to be automated systems. If anything, they suggest the humans were trying to communicate with future civilizations. Communicate? Javed laughed bitterly. Is that what you call it when ancient technology suddenly springs to life, broadcasting signals to unknown recipients? The humans were warmongers, everyone knows this. If they survived and are returning, it means conquest. The council chamber, perched atop the highest tower in Unity City on Nova Terra, offered a panoramic view of the gleaming metropolis below. For 3,000 years, this had been the center of galactic governance, a symbol of the peace and prosperity achieved after the tumultuous post-human era. What does intelligence say? Asked Counselor Nemtorath, the Vizirai whose species prided themselves on remaining neutral in political disputes. Grand Marshal Orla Zakovic, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward from the shadows at the chamber's edge. As head of coalition intelligence, her presence at council meetings was rare and always significant. Our analysis suggests these activations are not random, she said, her voice steady and matter-of-fact. They follow a pattern, moving inward from the outer rim toward the galactic core. Moreover, they only activate when discovered by archaeological teams, suggesting they were meant to be found. A breadcrumb trail, Counselor Lithera mused. Leading us somewhere, Nemtorath added. Or leading something to us, Javid growled. Marshal Zakovic activated the chamber's central holographic display. A galactic map appeared, with dozens of red markers indicating activated human installations. Based on the distribution and timing of these activations, we project the pattern will culminate here, she said, highlighting a region of empty space near the galactic center. There are no habitable systems in this area, but our long-range scans have detected unusual energy signatures. A hidden human world? Counselor Nemtorath asked, leaning forward with interest. Possibly. Or a weapon. Or nothing at all. The Marshal's voice betrayed no emotion. I've dispatched a stealth fleet to investigate. They will reach the coordinates in 3 standard days. High Counselor Javid rose to his full height. This council has been too complacent for generations. We told ourselves the humans were gone, that we had surpassed them. What if we were wrong? What if they've been watching us all along, waiting for the right moment to reclaim what was once theirs? You're being paranoid, Counselor Lithera said, but without conviction. The same fear had crossed her mind. Am I? Javid challenged. Then explain why these installations are activating now, after thousands of years of dormancy. Explain the transmissions they're sending into deep space. Explain why they contain technologies we still can't fully comprehend. No one offered an explanation. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of environmental systems. I move that we place all coalition forces on high alert, Javid finally said, and that we quarantine any system where human technology has been discovered. That's nearly 30 systems, Lithera protested. The economic impact would be devastating. Not as devastating as a human invasion fleet, Javid countered. Before the argument could escalate further, the chamber doors burst open. A junior officer rushed in, protocol forgotten in her haste. Grand Marshal, she gasped. The stealth fleet has been destroyed. The council erupted in chaos. Marshal Zakovic silenced them with a raised hand. Explain, she ordered. They arrived at the coordinates early due to an anomalous slipstream current. Upon emergence, they detected a massive structure, artificial, but unlike anything in our records. When they approached for closer inspection, the structure responded. Responded how? The Marshal's voice remained steady, but her posture had tensed visibly. It released energy pulses that disabled our ship's systems. Before communications were lost, they reported seeing vessels emerging from the structure. Thousands of them. She swallowed hard. The final transmission included a visual. She projected an image into the center of the chamber. There, replacing the galactic map, floated the unmistakable form of a spacecraft, sleek, advanced, and bearing markings that every person present recognized with primal fear. Human markings. They're back, Counselor Javid whispered. Echoes of the departed. Part 2, The Return. First Contact Specialist Jorith Ven stood motionless on the observation deck of the Coalition diplomatic vessel Concordia, watching the stars streak past as they traversed the quantum corridor. His pale blue skin, characteristic of the Novali species, seemed to absorb the starlight rather than reflect it. Four pupilless eyes, evolved for the dim light of his homeworld, blinked in vertical pairs as he contemplated the mission ahead. Specialist Ven, we're approaching the rendezvous coordinates, announced Captain Talira Voss, a tall Meridian whose exoskeleton gleamed under the ambient lighting. The human vessels haven't moved from their position. Thank you, Captain, Jorith replied, his voice melodic despite the gravity of their situation. Any response to our communication attempts? None. They maintain position at the edge of the Antares system but have taken no hostile action. A diplomatic mission to an unknown force that had destroyed a coalition stealth fleet was unprecedented. But then, so was the return of a species believed extinct for 8 millennia. They're waiting for us, Jorith said. They could have pressed their advantage after neutralizing our reconnaissance vessels, but they didn't. That suggests they want dialogue. Or they're toying with us, Talira replied, mandibles clicking with tension. The historical archives are clear about human tendencies toward dominance displays. Jorith turned to face the captain. With respect, the historical archives were apparently wrong about humanity's extinction. Perhaps they're wrong about other things as well. Before Talira could respond, the ship's tactical officer called out, exiting quantum corridor in 30 seconds. Jorith moved to the command center, taking his position beside the captain's raised platform. Around him, the Concordia's crew, representing 17 different coalition species, prepared for potential conflict even as they carried out a diplomatic mission. Emergence in 3, 2, 1. The swirling blue-white energies of the quantum corridor dissipated, revealing normal space, and the largest spacecraft Jorith had ever seen. The human vessel dwarfed the Concordia, a sleek leviathan of gleaming metal and pulsing energy fields that seemed to bend light around its hull. It hung in space like an ancient predator, patient and imposing. By the first stars, whispered Captain Talira. It's at least 20 kilometers long. And there are thousands more behind it, added the tactical officer, voice wavering as the sensors displayed the full extent of the human fleet arrayed throughout the system. They could have obliterated every coalition world by now, Jorith observed. Yet they wait here, at the edge of populated space. Whatever their intent, I don't believe it's conquest. A communications officer interrupted, we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel. On screen, ordered Talira. The main view screen flickered, and a human figure appeared. Female, by their species' dimorphic characteristics, with dark skin and closely cropped silver hair. She wore a uniform of midnight blue with silver insignia that none of them recognized. Greetings, representatives of the Galactic Coalition, she said in flawless standard, the diplomatic language of the Allied worlds. I am Fleet Marshal Octavia Wainwright of the Terran Defense Force. Welcome to this parley. Jorith stepped forward. Fleet Marshal, I am First Contact Specialist Jorith Venn, representing the Galactic Coalition. We come seeking explanation for your return and your intentions toward Coalition space. The human's expression remained measured, but Jorith, trained to read the micro-expressions of hundreds of species, detected something like sadness in her eyes. 8,000 years ago, humanity departed this galaxy not out of weakness but out of strength, not in defeat but in sacrifice, she said. We left behind warning systems and monitors, meant to activate when the time was right. That time has come, sooner than we hoped. You claim to have left voluntarily, Captain Talira interjected, skepticism evident in her voice. Yet all historical records indicate human civilization destroyed itself through warfare and environmental collapse. A narrative that served a purpose, Wainwright replied. The young races needed unity, a common understanding to build upon. If that understanding painted us as destroyers rather than guardians, so be it. We were gone anyway. Guardians? Jorith asked, his professional calm giving way to genuine curiosity. What were you guarding against? The human marshal's face grew grave. We call it the Void. A transdimensional entity that consumes intelligent life and the quantum patterns generated by consciousness itself. 8 millennia ago, it entered this galaxy and began destroying worlds. We tried to fight, but our weapons were ineffective. The view screen changed, displaying historical records, massive shadow-like distortions enveloping planets, evacuation fleets departing Earth and its colonies, installations being constructed and hidden across the galaxy. We faced an impossible choice, Wainwright continued as the images played. Try to save ourselves and leave the younger species to perish, or lead the Void away, buying you time to evolve, perhaps one day to develop defenses we could not. You sacrificed your homeworld to protect species you had never even met? Jorith asked, struggling to reconcile this account with the Coalition's understanding of human nature. Yes, Wainwright answered simply. Our ancestors gathered as much of humanity as they could and fled to the Andromeda Galaxy. The Void followed, as we intended. For millennia, we've led it on a chase through neighboring galaxies, developing technologies to combat it while keeping it distant from the Milky Way. Captain Talira's skepticism had transformed into horrified understanding. And now it's returning. We've developed weapons capable of destroying the void, Wainwright confirmed. And it knows this. It has changed course, racing back toward the richest feeding ground it knows, this galaxy, your worlds, your people. Joreth felt a chill despite the environmental controls. How long do we have? Less than you think, came the grim reply. Our projections showed we had months, but new data suggests weeks at most. The void moves through dimensions we can barely comprehend, making its travel time variable. This could be an elaborate deception, Talira said, though her tone lacked conviction. A pretext for reclaiming your ancient territories. Wainwright's expression softened with something like pity. If conquest were our goal, would we announce ourselves at all? Our fleet outmatches your combined forces by several orders of magnitude. You wouldn't have known what hit you before it was too late. Before anyone could respond, alarms blared across the Concordia's bridge. Captain, the sensor officer cried. Long-range sensors are detecting something massive approaching from the galactic rim. It's consuming stars as it comes. Fleet Marshal Wainwright's expression hardened. The void has arrived ahead of our projections. There's no more time for debate. Will you stand with us, or will you perish alone? Dr. Nima Khalid had never expected to find herself aboard a human vessel, let alone in a war council alongside the highest military leaders of both civilizations. Yet here she stood in a vast chamber aboard the Terran flagship Prometheus, surrounded by holographic displays showing real-time updates from across the galaxy. The void entity is consuming systems at an accelerating rate, reported Professor Rayhan Kapoor, the lead human scientist, as he manipulated a three-dimensional map. We've lost the Deneb and Procyon systems already. Evacuation fleets got most of the population out, added Grand Marshal Zakovic, but our defense forces were completely absorbed. Nima studied the human scientist with fascination. Kapoor was elderly by human standards, with deep lines etched into his brown face and silver streaking through his black hair. Yet he moved with the energy of someone half his apparent age, his hands dancing through the holographic interface with practiced ease. The dimensional anchor is our only hope, Kapoor continued. When completed, it will force the void fully into our reality, making it vulnerable to conventional weapons. The design requires materials and energy sources from at least 30 different worlds, said Tariq Omandi, who had been working with the human scientists since their arrival. His skin had settled into a determined blue as he pointed to schematics floating above the central table. No single species has all the necessary components. Which is precisely why we need complete cooperation, Fleet Marshal Wainwright said as she entered the chamber, followed by Joreth Venn and several coalition representatives. Specialist Venn has convinced the Coalition Security Council to commit fully to our defense plan. Nima caught Joretha's eye across the room. The Novali diplomat looked exhausted, his normally vibrant blue skin dull with fatigue. It wasn't easy, he admitted. High Counselor Rashid remains convinced this is somehow an elaborate human plot to reclaim dominance. Even with the void consuming worlds as we speak? Nima asked incredulously. Fear and suspicion run deep, Joreth replied. 8,000 years of viewing humans as the galaxy's cautionary tale can't be undone in days. But enough leaders saw reason when confronted with the evidence. Fleet Marshal Wainwright addressed the assembled group. We have 3 weeks to complete the dimensional anchor while our combined fleets slow the void's advance. Every habitable world in the path of the entity must be evacuated. Every available industrial center must be converted to produce anchor components. And if we fail, asked Director Vask Dorn, who had been silently observing until now. Then this galaxy falls, Wainwright said simply. And eventually, all others will follow. The void's hunger is infinite. The war room erupted in discussion as military leaders debated tactics and scientists argued over theoretical principles. Nima found herself overwhelmed by the scope of what they faced and withdrew to a quieter corner of the room. To her surprise, Professor Kapoor followed. It's a lot to process, the human scientist said, his accent giving the standard language a melodic quality. Nima nodded. My entire understanding of history has been overturned in a matter of days. I don't know what to believe anymore. Believe in survival, Kapoor suggested. The rest, the politics, the historical revisions, the blame, that can all come later, if we succeed. Why did you let them portray humans as villains? Nima asked suddenly, the question that had been burning in her mind since the humans' return. You must have known what our history said about your species. Kapoor's expression grew distant. It served a purpose. The young races needed a common story, a shared understanding to unite around. If that narrative painted us as destroyers rather than saviors, well. He shrugged. We were gone anyway. What did it matter? It matters to truth, Nima insisted. Truth is a luxury for peaceful times, Kapoor replied, not unkindly. Now we need unity more than truth. Their conversation was interrupted by an alarm. The holographic display at the center of the war room changed, showing real-time footage from the edge of Coalition space, a vast darkness spreading across the stars, not like a solid object but like a hole in reality itself, the absence of everything, even light. The void has breached the Arcturus defensive line, Professor Kapoor announced grimly. It's accelerating toward the core systems. The battle for the galaxy unfolded across 3 desperate weeks. The combined human coalition fleet fought delaying actions, evacuating worlds before the void could reach them, deploying experimental weapons that slowed but could not stop the entity's advance. All the while, teams of scientists and engineers across every inhabited world worked frantically to construct components for the dimensional anchor, a project so vast that no single planet could host it. When completed, the device would form a spherical array 50,000 kilometers in diameter, positioned at carefully calculated coordinates in intergalactic space. Its purpose, to force the void fully into the material universe, making it vulnerable to the specialized weapons the humans had developed during their long exile. Joreth then found himself serving as the bridge between mistrustful species, negotiating resource allocations and manufacturing priorities as the crisis deepened. Old enemies set aside centuries of hostility to work together, theoretical rivals shared technological secrets that had once been guarded by death penalties. Nima Khalid's archaeological expertise proved unexpectedly valuable as more ancient human installations activated across the galaxy, revealing caches of preserved technology and strategic information left behind millennia ago. Each discovery reinforced the truth of the humans' account, they had departed not as conquerors or cowards, but as guardians. On the bridge of the Prometheus, which had become the de facto command center for the combined forces, Fleet Marshal Wainwright received regular updates on both the military campaign and the construction efforts. We've lost the Sirius system, reported her tactical officer. Coalition evacuation ships got most of the population out, but the defense fleet was completely consumed. Wainwright closed her eyes briefly in silent acknowledgement of the sacrifice. The anchor. 97% complete, Professor Kapoor replied. Final calibrations are underway. If the void maintains its current trajectory, we'll have exactly one chance to deploy it. High Counselor Rashid, who had reluctantly joined the command staff after witnessing the void's devastation firsthand, asked the question on everyone's mind, and if it fails? Then we execute the Exodus Protocol, Wainwright answered. We save who we can and lead the void away once more, buying more time for the next generation to find a solution. Another 8,000 years of exile, Kapoor murmured. If necessary, the Fleet Marshal confirmed. We are guardians. That is our purpose. The final confrontation occurred in a vast emptiness between the Orion and Sagittarius arms, far from any inhabited worlds. The dimensional anchor, a marvel of cooperative engineering, hung in space like a constellation of artificial stars, waiting. The void approached, a spreading darkness that consumed light itself, tendrils of non-existence reaching outward as it sensed the consciousness of the combined fleet arrayed against it. Anchor activation in 3, 2, 1. Professor Kapoor's voice was steady as he initiated the sequence they had worked toward for weeks. The massive array hummed to life, each component glowing with energy as quantum fields expanded outward, intersecting and reinforcing one another. Where they met the advancing darkness, reality itself seemed to shudder. "It's working," Jorith called out, watching the sensor readings. "The void is being forced into our dimensional plane." The entity that had existed partially beyond their reality began to take physical form, a writhing mass of darkness visible now not as absence but as substance, vulnerable at last to the weapons of the material universe. "All ships, commence firing pattern Alpha," Fleet Marshal Wainwright commanded. "Target the convergence points identified by tactical." Thousands of vessels, human and coalition alike, unleashed weapons that would have annihilated planets. Beams of concentrated energy, quantum disruptors, and exotic matter projectors all focused on the now corporeal void. The entity fought back, tentacles of darkness lashing out to engulf ships whole, but it could no longer simply phase through matter or energy. For the first time in recorded history, it knew pain. It knew fear. "Convergence point stabilizing," Professor Kapoor reported, his voice rising with cautious hope. "The void is fully manifested. Final targeting solutions locked." At Wainwright's command, the human flagship deployed its ultimate weapon, the Terminus Array, a device that had taken millennia of exile to perfect. It fired not energy or matter but something more fundamental, a cascade of reality itself, reinforcing the laws of physics and existence against an entity that had evolved to violate them. Where the cascade struck the void, the darkness unraveled, coming apart not in explosion or dissolution but in a kind of fundamental negation, the anti-existence that had defined it now turned against itself. "It's working," Nima whispered, watching through the view screen as the void began to collapse inward. "It's actually working." For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the combined fleet held position, weapons focused on the shrinking darkness. Then, with a final pulse of anti-light that temporarily blinded every sensor array, the void was gone, not merely departed to another dimension, but truly destroyed. Silence fell across the command center, broken only by the soft beeping of instruments confirming what their eyes could scarcely believe. 8,000 years, Fleet Marshal Wainwright said quietly. 8,000 years of exile, of planning, of sacrifice, and finally, it's over. 1 month later, representatives from every coalition world gathered on Nova Terra for the signing of the Unity Accord. Humans, no longer phantoms of a cautionary past but living allies, stood alongside species they had once feared would be exterminated by the void. Dr. Nima Khalid found herself appointed as the coalition's chief liaison to the returning humans, her archaeological expertise now focused not on uncovering the past but on building a shared future. "Will you stay?" she asked Professor Kapoor as they watched the ceremonial fleets of both civilizations perform synchronized maneuvers above the capital city. "Or will humanity seek its own path now?" "We've been wanderers for 8 millennia, he replied thoughtfully. "Our home has been among the stars, not on any particular world. I think most of us will remain integrated with the galaxy at large, though some talk of reclaiming Earth and our original colonies." "And the truth?" Nima pressed. "Will the historical record be corrected?" Kapoor smiled. "Truth is no longer a luxury, Dr. Khalid. It's the foundation on which we'll build whatever comes next." Below them, the leaders of 2 civilizations, one ancient and returned, one young and evolving, signed the document that would unite their futures. The final clause, added at Fleet Marshal Wainwright's insistence, formalized what humanity had always seen as its role, even when separated by 8,000 years and unimaginable distance. "We stand as guardians of all sentient life, not through dominion but through service, not through fear but through sacrifice. What was begun in exile shall continue in communion, for as long as the stars themselves endure." In the vastness of space, the ancient human installations that had activated to herald their creator's return now served a new purpose, beacons of cooperation and shared knowledge across a galaxy no longer divided by fear or threatened by cosmic horror. The echoes of the departed had become the foundation for a future neither civilization could have achieved alone.